Imagine a respected doctor dedicated to saving lives, found dead under the most chilling and mysterious circumstances, right within the walls of her own hospital. A place meant for healing becomes the site of a brutal crime, raising questions no one seems able to answer. What really happened to Dr. D on that fateful night? Was it a tragic accident, a sinister cover-up, or something far more terrifying? Welcome to Spine-Chilling Stories, where we explore the darkest corners of real-life mysteries and unsolved crimes. Each story we present is a journey into the unknown, a glimpse into the horrors that lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. Today, we take you to Kolkata, India, where a promising young doctor's untimely death has left the nation reeling, raising more questions than answers, and exposing a potential cover-up that chills the soul. In the shadowy hours just before dawn on August 9, 2024, an unsettling silence enveloped the corridors of R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital in Kolkata. This silence was abruptly shattered when a chilling scene was uncovered in an ordinary seminar room, a room that had become anything but. Here, the body of a 31-year-old postgraduate trainee doctor, admired widely for her relentless dedication and fervour for medical practice, was found under circumstances that painted a stark and eerie picture of her final moments. The young doctor, known for her unwavering commitment to her profession and her compassionate nature, had sought a brief respite in the seminar room after enduring the demands of a taxing overnight shift. This space, typically a sanctuary for learning and reflection, was transformed into a grim stage of tragedy. Her colleagues, arriving to find her unresponsive, were met with a sight that bore the hallmarks of a harrowing ordeal. Her lifeless form bore silent testimony to an unimaginable nightmare that unfolded in the very heart of a place dedicated to healing. What was initially a routine night at the hospital spiraled into a vortex of horror and disbelief as the details of her condition began to surface. Her body, discovered in a state that suggested a struggle had taken place, prompted immediate questions and fears. The stark contrast between the clinical sterility of the room and the violent, chaotic end she met painted a disturbing picture of her last hours. This tragic discovery not only plunged the hospital into deep mourning, but also ignited a firestorm of questions and speculation. How could such a brutal act occur within the walls of a respected medical institution? Who could be behind such a heinous crime? As the sun rose on that fateful day, it cast light not only on the devastating loss of a promising life, but also on the shadows that lay hidden in the corners of a place that should have been safe. The ripple effects of this tragedy would soon extend far beyond the confines of the hospital, drawing attention and outcry from across the nation. When her colleagues found her body, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. She lay partially undressed on the floor, her dishevelled appearance and the visible injuries across her body telling a horrifying story of her final moments. Abrasions and contusions were spread across her face, arms and legs, indicative of a fierce struggle. Blood, starkly evident on her face and seeping from her mouth, added a visceral terror to the scene, transforming a space meant for healing into a tableau of violence. The immediate reaction from those who found her was a mix of horror and disbelief. Questions arose instantly. How could such a brutal act occur within the hospital's walls, a place dedicated to care and safety? The atmosphere was heavy with a palpable sense of betrayal and confusion. Initially, the police speculated that it might have been a suicide, a theory that seemed plausible given the high-pressure environment faced by medical professionals. However, this hypothesis quickly began to show cracks as more details of the scene were analysed. The pattern and severity of the injuries suggested a much more aggressive altercation, pointing towards foul play rather than self-harm. This grim scene marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would unravel a darker narrative, challenging the initial impressions of suicide and leading investigators down a path filled with more questions than answers. As the reality of the situation set in, it became clear that this was not just a tragic incident, but a sinister act that would stir public outcry and demand a thorough examination of the circumstances leading to such a devastating end. The doctor, a young and aspiring medical professional, was held in high esteem by both her peers and mentors at R.G. Carr Medical College and Hospital. Known for her unwavering dedication to medicine, she was driven by a profound desire to impact lives positively and contribute meaningfully to the world of healthcare. Her colleagues described her as a beacon of kindness and intelligence, always ready to go the extra mile for her patients and lend a supportive ear to her co-workers. Her deep commitment to her vocation shone brightly, influencing those around her and leaving an indelible mark on all who had the privilege of knowing her. Tragically, her untimely death was not merely a loss for her family and friends, but represented a significant blow to the entire medical community. The potential she carried for future contributions to medicine and the lives she could have touched was irrevocably lost, leaving a void that echoed through the halls of the hospital and beyond. Amidst the shock and sorrow following the discovery of her body, her father emerged as a pillar of strength, despite being consumed by grief and the torment of unanswered questions. He strongly contested the initial report suggesting suicide, asserting with conviction that his daughter had been in a good place in her life, showing no signs of depression or any indication that she might harm herself. His firm belief was that she was content, thriving in her career, and looking forward to a future filled with promise, making the circumstances of her death more suspicious and incongruous with the vibrant life she led. Determined to seek justice for his daughter, he challenged the cursory conclusions and pushed for a deeper investigation. He argued passionately that the brutal nature of her injuries and the condition in which she was found pointed unmistakably to murder. For him, and for everyone who knew the kind-hearted and dedicated doctor, the notion that she could have orchestrated her own demise was not only implausible but offensive. It was clear to him she had been cruelly taken from them, and the truth behind her tragic end had to be uncovered, not just for his family, but for the integrity of the community she served so diligently. The revelations of the autopsy report cast a harsh light on the dark circumstances surrounding the young doctor's death. As the medical examiner detailed the findings, the stark reality of what had occurred in that quiet seminar room came into devastating focus, confirming the worst fears of her family and friends. Extensive physical trauma. The doctor's body bore the signs of a harrowing encounter. Detailed examination showed extensive injuries across her face, neck, abdomen, and legs. Each mark told a story of the violent struggle she endured, bruises and abrasions that were not just defensive, but indicative of an aggressive assault by one or more attackers. Evidence of strangulation. Among the most alarming findings were the clear signs of strangulation. The marks on her neck painted a grim picture of the brutality she faced. It appeared she had been forcefully subdued, with her attackers exerting fatal pressure that left deep, unmistakable ligature marks. Horrific indicators of sexual assault. The autopsy further revealed severe trauma consistent with a brutal sexual assault. There was significant bleeding and injury, pointing to the violent nature of the attack. This aspect of the findings was particularly horrifying and spoke volumes about the intentions of her assailants. Disturbing discovery of biological evidence. One of the most shocking findings from the autopsy was the presence of an unusually high volume of biological material, measuring approximately 150 grams. This amount significantly surpasses what would typically be expected from a single individual, hinting at the presence of multiple participants in this brutal act. This crucial detail not only complicates the narrative, but also amplifies the severity of the crime, suggesting a coordinated assault by several assailants. This aspect of the evidence has been pivotal in guiding the direction of the investigation, underscoring the calculated nature of the attack. Neck bone fractures. Adding to the evidence was the discovery of fractures in her neck bones. These fractures were consistent with severe blunt force, suggesting that considerable violence was used to subdue and ultimately kill her. These autopsy findings shattered any lingering thoughts of suicide, painting a clear and undeniable picture of murder. Each piece of evidence added layers to the story of her final excruciating moments, pointing to a calculated and vicious attack that was both sexual and homicidal in nature. For her family, these revelations were a devastating confirmation of their darkest fears. Their beloved daughter and respected colleague had fallen victim to a heinous crime that was as brutal as it was intentional. The report not only spurred the police to redirect their investigation, but also ignited a firestorm of media attention and public outrage, demanding justice for a life so cruelly and violently taken. As the grim details of the doctor's tragic death emerged, a profound sense of anger and dismay swept through Kolkata, resonating deeply within the medical community and spilling out into the streets. The harrowing loss of a young, dedicated doctor in such brutal circumstances ignited a firestorm of protest that quickly spread across the city. Outside the RG Medical College, the air was thick with grief and fury. Medical professionals, students, and citizens united in their demand for justice, their voices loud and their presence impossible to ignore. They gathered in large numbers, their faces marked by the pain of loss and the resolve to seek justice. Placards and banners demanding justice for Dr. D and proclaiming no more silence became symbols of a movement that was about more than just one individual's tragedy. The demonstrations reflected a deep-seated frustration with systemic issues that went far beyond this single incident. Participants raised critical questions about the safety of women in the workplace, especially in high-stress environments like healthcare, where the dedication to saving lives is often met with challenging working conditions. They also highlighted the vulnerabilities faced by medical professionals who work long hours, often in isolated settings, which could expose them to risks that the community was no longer willing to ignore. The outcry was not just a response to a colleague's death, it was a public indictment of the perceived indifference shown by some authorities toward the safety of healthcare workers. It became a rallying cry for change, pressing for more robust measures to protect those who commit their lives to the care of others. The protests served as a catalyst for wider discussions on national safety standards for medical professionals, sparking debates among policymakers and prompting calls for legislative action. As the city grappled with its grief, the collective mourning turned into a powerful force for advocacy, pushing for systemic changes to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again within the sacred walls of a hospital. This tragic event and the public's vehement response underscored the urgent need for a reevaluation of security protocols in medical institutions and became a defining moment in the fight for the rights and protection of healthcare workers across India. As the city of Kolkata rallied in protest, demanding justice for the slain doctor, a troubling narrative began to unfold, casting shadows of doubt over those tasked with safeguarding the community. At the heart of these allegations was the doctor's father, who vehemently declared that his daughter had fallen victim not just to a brutal crime, but to a calculated cover-up orchestrated by influential figures within the hospital administration and local law enforcement. With a voice fraught with grief and anger, he shared his conviction that his daughter had been subjected to gang rape and subsequent murder, a scenario far darker than any authority was willing to admit. He suggested that there were those who had a vested interest in muffling the true details of the case, insinuating that the initial misclassification of her death as a possible suicide was part of a broader scheme to protect certain individuals. These explosive accusations found a ready audience among a populace already wary of institutional corruption and malfeasance. The public's trust was further eroded by the apparent mishandling of the investigation, crucial delays in conducting the autopsy, the absence of swift arrest despite the gruesome nature of the crime, and a series of contradictory statements issued by the authorities. Each misstep was dissected and discussed, adding layers to the conspiracy theories circulating throughout the community. Fueling these concerns were reports from inside the hospital that suggested a deliberate slowness in securing and processing the crime scene, which could have compromised vital evidence. Whispers of records being altered or lost, of CCTV footage that was mysteriously unavailable, and of potential witnesses being pressured to stay silent, painted a sinister picture of the lengths to which some might go to bury the truth. As the city seethed with unrest, the calls for an independent investigation grew louder. The community began to question whether the tragic end met by the young doctor was not only a reflection of individual malice, but also indicative of systemic failures and a culture of cover-up that could no longer be ignored. The case became a litmus test for the integrity of local institutions, challenging them to restore public confidence and ensure that justice was not only done, but seen to be done in the face of overwhelming skepticism. The tragic circumstances surrounding the young doctor's death rapidly escalated into a matter of national concern, capturing the attention of political leaders and influential public figures across India. The outcry for justice resonated through the corridors of power, prompting immediate and vociferous responses from both state and national levels. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee was quick to address the public's growing unease, vocally condemning the heinous nature of the crime. In a decisive public address, she described the incident as both unfortunate and despicable, articulating a firm commitment to seeing justice served. Her promise to the citizens was clear. Her administration would spare no effort in ensuring that those responsible for such a brutal act were held accountable under the law. However, the gravity of the case and the swirling allegations of a cover-up intensified the political pressure on Banerjee's government. Critics and opposition parties, particularly vocal members from the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, challenged the state's handling of the investigation. They argued that the local police were potentially compromised and that only a body as robust and independent as the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, could guarantee a fair examination of the facts. These demands for a CBI intervention echoed across media outlets and social platforms, gaining substantial public support. The opposition leveraged this tragic event to highlight what they perceived as systemic issues within the state's governance, especially concerning law enforcement and judicial integrity. They insisted that transferring the case to the CBI would not only ensure an unbiased investigation, but would also restore public faith in the process of justice. Amidst this political turmoil, the case became a focal point for broader discussions about the efficacy of state authorities versus central agencies in handling high-profile crimes. Debates and panel discussions frequently featured experts, activists, and former officials who weighed in on the implications of such a transfer of authority, scrutinizing the potential benefits and drawbacks. As the political narrative unfolded, the public vigilance remained high, with citizens closely monitoring the responses from both state and central governments. The widespread demand for transparency and accountability reflected a collective insistence on justice that transcended political affiliations, uniting a diverse populace in their quest for answers and their demand for justice for the fallen doctor. Amidst a crescendo of public outcry and media scrutiny, the Kolkata police were compelled to take decisive action. They established a special investigation team, SIT, composed of highly experienced detectives, to delve into the perplexing and dark circumstances surrounding the young doctor's tragic demise. This specialised unit embarked on a challenging journey, aiming to shed light on a case that had quickly become shrouded in mystery and controversy. The investigative team confronted a maze of complexities right from the start. The hospital, a sprawling complex teeming with staff across various shifts, presented a significant challenge in narrowing down potential suspects. The initial missteps in securing the crime scene promptly, where crucial forensic evidence could have been collected, further muddied the waters, potentially washing away vital clues. As the SIT dug deeper, they conducted extensive interviews with numerous hospital employees, from senior doctors to interns who were present on that fateful night. Each session was meticulously executed, yet yielded frustratingly sparse insights, leaving the investigative team grappling with more questions than answers. Complicating the investigation was the haunting notion that the doctor might have known her assailant or assailants. The absence of any signs of forced entry into the seminar room where her body was discovered suggested a chilling possibility. She could have admitted the perpetrators, herself, under circumstances that remain unknown. This theory introduced a sinister layer to the case, implying that the threat could still be lurking within the hospital's walls, hidden in plain sight among the many faces of her colleagues. The SIT's task was not only to navigate through the dense fog of potential leads and deceptive calm, but also to manage the growing impatience and skepticism from the public and the media. Each step of the investigation was scrutinised, each finding examined under the intense spotlight of communal grief and anger. As the days turned into weeks, with the investigation slowly unfolding amidst hurdles and setbacks, the urgency for answers only intensified. The community's trust in the ability of local law enforcement to unravel the truth was on a knife edge, with the spectre of the case potentially going cold, looming large. The pressure mounted for the SIT to deliver results that could bring closure to the aggrieved family and a rattled city, all awaiting justice for a life so brutally cut short. As the investigation into the tragic death of the young doctor in Kolkata continues, numerous questions still linger, casting long shadows over the quest for truth. At the forefront is the mystery of who is responsible for the doctor's brutal murder. Was this crime a spur-of-the-moment act, or was it a carefully planned assault? The evidence of multiple assailants complicates the narrative, pointing to a possibly premeditated crime, rather than the actions of a single individual. The slow pace of the investigation has sparked widespread speculation about potential interference from high-profile individuals, possibly to obscure the full extent of the crime. Accusations from the victim's family about a cover-up involve the hospital administration and local law enforcement, suggesting that there might be more to the story than meets the eye. This has led to public distrust, with many wondering if there are influential forces at play aiming to protect certain interests. Amid these complex layers of intrigue, a significant development has occurred. An arrest has been made. This development could potentially answer some of the burning questions or open new avenues of inquiry. Despite this progress, the investigation by the Special Investigation Team, SIT, is far from over. The identity and motive of the culprits are still under intense scrutiny, and the involvement of more than one individual suggests a broader conspiracy. The victim's father remains a staunch advocate for justice, tirelessly pushing against the bureaucratic and social hurdles that dampen hopes for a swift resolution. While the initial fervour of the protests has diminished, the emotional and legal battles continue for those personally affected by the tragedy. The community's engagement may have waned in intensity, but the demand for answers and justice persists, fueled by the relentless pursuit of closure and the memory of a promising life brutally cut short. With the investigation ongoing and the recent arrest, there is a cautious optimism that the truth will eventually surface, shedding light on the darker realities that led to such a heinous act. The path to justice remains fraught with challenges, but the resolve to unearth the full story endures, driven by the hope that understanding what happened that tragic night would prevent such atrocities in the future. The death of the young doctor in Kolkata remains a dark and unresolved chapter in the city's history. It is a story marked by tragedy, fear, and unanswered questions. A life full of promise was brutally taken, leaving behind a void that can never be filled. The case has exposed the vulnerabilities faced by women, particularly in professions where they are expected to work long hours, often in isolated or unsafe environments. It has also highlighted the deep-seated issues of corruption and potential cover-ups that can derail the pursuit of justice. For For the doctor's family, friends and colleagues, the pain of losing her is compounded by the fear that her killers may never be brought to justice. As the investigation into the tragic death of the young doctor in Kolkata stretches on, a myriad of unanswered questions continues to haunt those seeking justice. Central to the ongoing inquiry is the identity and motives of those responsible for this heinous act. Was this crime a calculated, premeditated act or a spontaneous act of violence? The complexity deepens with the unsettling possibility of multiple assailants being involved, suggesting a level of coordination that transforms this case from a random act of violence into a deliberate assault. The story has spread across social media, where a global audience shares and discusses the developments, keeping the demand for justice alive. The investigation is actively ongoing, with all involved clinging to the hope of a breakthrough that will bring closure and justice to a case that has become emblematic of the broader struggles against violence and corruption. The international spotlight on this case not only exemplifies the universal demand for justice, but also reflects the shared human values that transcend geographical and cultural boundaries. As this story continues to unfold on the global stage, the world watches and waits, hopeful that justice will prevail and that such tragedies will spur societal changes to better protect the most vulnerable. This has been another episode of Spine-Chilling Stories. We hope that by sharing this tragic tale, we can keep the memory of Dr. D alive and remind everyone of the importance of seeking justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Remember, the fight for truth and justice is never over. Stay vigilant, and until next time, stay safe.